The night was heavy and quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel louder than it should. A small team moved through rough land, step by careful step. They had trained for moments like this for years. Each man knew his role, trusted the others, and followed one steady presence at the front. Their leader did not speak much, but when he did, his words were clear and calm. That calm had carried them through many missions before. This mission was meant to be short. In and out, gather what was needed, confirm the location, and leave before anyone noticed. The plan looked simple on paper, but the land did not care about plans. The ground was uneven, the air dry, and the darkness full of unknown shapes. Still, the team moved with quiet confidence. They believed in the training. They believed in their leader. As they moved deeper, the radio crackled once, then went silent. It was not unusual. Signals often failed in places like this. The team adjusted without panic. Hand signals replaced words. Eyes stayed sharp. Breathing slowed. Every sense stayed alert. Then it happened. A sudden burst of noise shattered the calm. Lights flashed from the distance. The sound of movement rushed toward them from more than one direction. The team reacted instantly, spreading out, taking cover, doing what they had practiced countless times. The leader moved with purpose, guiding them through the chaos, pointing them towards safer ground. The moment felt stretched, like time slowed down. Dust filled the air. Shadows crossed in quick flashes. Orders were given, short and direct. Then, without warning, something changed. The ground gave way near the leader's position. He disappeared from sight, swallowed by darkness and noise. The team tried to reach him. One moved forward, then another. The leader's voice came once through the radio, broken and weak, then nothing. The radio went dead again. The situation grew worse by the second. The team was running out of options. They were forced to pull back. It was the hardest call any of them had ever faced. Leaving was not in their nature. They did not leave their own behind. But the enemy presence was growing, and staying meant risking everyone. With heavy hearts and tight jaws, they moved away, hoping they could circle back when things cooled down. They waited. They listened. They searched from a distance as long as they could. There was no signal, no movement, no sign. By the time they reached a safer zone, exhaustion had set in. Dirt covered their faces. Hands shook slightly from effort and adrenaline. When they counted heads, the truth settled in like a weight on the chest. Their leader was not there. No one spoke for a long moment. Each man replayed the last seconds in his mind. The hand signal, the step forward, the sound of the ground giving way. They questioned every choice, every second. Guilt spread quietly among them. They were trained for loss, but training did not erase pain. Back at base, the report was written in careful words. Missing during operation, presumed lost. Those words felt empty and cruel. The leader had been more than a rank or a title. He had been the steady point when things went wrong. He had been the one who noticed when someone was pushing too hard or holding something in. He had earned their respect not by force, but by example. Command reviewed the situation. Drones were sent. Data was analyzed. Maps were studied again and again. The land showed no clear answers. The enemy controlled the area now. Any recovery attempt would be dangerous, with no promise of success. Time passed slowly. The team stayed together, but something had changed. Meals were quiet. Jokes faded faster than usual. Each man carried the same question, but did not ask it out loud. Could he still be alive? At night, some of them dreamed of the mission. In those dreams, they reached him in time. In others, they stood frozen as he slipped away again. Sleep did not come easily. Officially, the leader was listed as lost. The word spread through quiet channels. Another name added to a long list few people ever saw. To the outside world, it was just another line in a report. To the team, it was a wound that stayed open. What they did not know was that far from the base, far from the noise and the reports, the story was not finished. Somewhere in that hostile land, the leader was still breathing. Hurt, alone, and running on instinct, he was fighting to stay alive. And somewhere else, A woman watched the same land with calm eyes. She studied it not with emotion but with focus. She had heard the quiet rumors. A leader missing. A team forced to leave. Others had already moved on, but she had not. For her, unanswered questions were never truly closed. She did not speak about it. She did not make promises. She simply began to prepare. While the team mourned and command reviewed files, she checked her gear, reviewed maps, and waited for the right moment. The team believed their leader was gone. They did not yet know that the path back had already begun. Far from the chaos of the mission, far from the noise and fear, a woman moved quietly through another kind of world. She was alone, but not lonely. She was calm, focused, and aware of every detail around her. Her reputation was something few outside her field fully understood. In whispered stories and classified files, she was known as precise, patient, and unshakable. A sniper, a tracker, and someone who had learned to wait for the exact moment to act. She had been following a trail that others had declared cold. Reports came in fragments. A team had gone in, and their leader had disappeared. Many believed the case closed. Most had already turned attention elsewhere, but she did not. Something in her gut told her the story was not over. She reviewed the maps, study after study, each one more detailed than the last. Lines marked paths, signs of enemy patrols, water sources, hidden shelters. Nothing was taken for granted. Every piece of information could make the difference between life and death. Her training was relentless, her mind always running scenarios, calculating odds and imagining outcomes. She did not rush. She never rushed. Her gear was carefully chosen. Every item served a purpose. Clothing designed to blend. Supplies enough for days. Weapons maintained to perfection. She packed, repacked, and checked everything multiple times. No mistakes could be allowed. In her world, mistakes were often fatal. She moved in silence, the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. Each step measured, each sound noticed. She had learned to read the land as if it were a book. Small signs others would miss were glaring to her trained eyes. Broken branches, disturbed soil, faint footprints. Even the smell of disturbed air could tell her where someone had been, how long ago, and in which direction they had moved. Days passed as she moved. The terrain was difficult, filled with dangers she could only anticipate, never fully control. Each night, she found cover, rested just enough, and observed. Stars were her guide when maps were not enough. The moon was her silent companion, revealing shapes and shadows. She never took unnecessary risks. Every move was deliberate, every pause purposeful. She thought of the team she had not met, and the leader who was missing. She did not know him personally, but she understood the bond that formed between people in such circumstances. She knew what it meant to rely on someone completely, to trust them with every step in dangerous situations. That knowledge guided her actions. This was not a mission for fame or recognition. It was about life and survival. Intelligence trickled in, patchy and unreliable. Others doubted. They believed the leader was gone. Some had already written it off as impossible to recover him, but she had learned long ago that impossible was rarely final. Patience, observation, and skill often changed what seemed certain. She held to that quietly, moving day by day, careful not to draw attention. She began to notice signs that the missing leader was still alive. Small disturbances in the environment suggested someone was moving, hiding, trying to survive. She followed these subtle clues with steady determination. Every discovery was a reason to continue. Every indication a confirmation that hope was still alive. At times, she had to wait for hours or even days, hidden, watching, analyzing. The enemy was still in the area. One wrong movement could bring disaster. Her patience was tested constantly. Hunger, exhaustion, and discomfort pressed in, but she remained focused. Her mind never strayed from the task. She had learned to endure long periods of discomfort to achieve critical objectives. She reached locations where others had already searched and found nothing, but she did not rely on luck. She relied on skill, observation, and understanding of human behavior in survival situations. She imagined the leader's actions, his possible routes, and where he might seek shelter. Her predictions were guided by logic, experience, and careful study of the environment. Along the way, she left no trace of herself. Every footprint was erased, every movement calculated to avoid detection. She moved as a shadow among shadows, unseen but always watching, always learning. The land was both her guide and her adversary. She respected it, understood its dangers, and used it to her advantage. The days stretched into nights, and the nights back into days. Progress was slow, measured in inches and careful steps. Every moment brought new challenges, new calculations, and new decisions. Her focus never wavered. The idea of leaving someone behind, especially a trained leader of a team, was unacceptable to her. She had seen too much to believe in giving up. She found signs that indicated recent activity. Fresh marks in soil, remnants of a shelter, traces of movement toward water and safety. These signs confirmed what she already hoped. The leader had survived the initial ambush. That knowledge strengthened her resolve. She now had a clear target, a mission that was tangible, immediate, and crucial. The sniper began to plan how to reach him safely. Every step was a calculated risk. The enemy was still present. The terrain was still hostile. Time was against her. She considered weather, visibility, distance, and potential threats. Every decision could change the outcome. There was no room for error. She did not speak to anyone about her actions. She did not seek recognition. Her work was silent, unseen, and often unacknowledged. Success, in her view, was measured only by survival and mission completion. She had long learned that deeds done quietly often had the most lasting impact. As she closed in, the signs of life became clearer. The tracks were fresher, the shelter more recent. She could sense movement without seeing it. She could feel the presence of another human navigating the same harsh landscape. Every instinct told her that she was on the right path. Her heart remained steady, her mind alert, and her purpose unwavering. She imagined a leader wounded, struggling, relying on instincts and training to stay alive. Her thoughts were not about glory, but about precision, patience, and timing. She knew that finding him was only the first step. The larger challenge was ensuring he could survive until he could be safely extracted. The sniper paused on a ridge, observing the path below. Signs confirmed that she was closing in. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, and silent. She had to avoid enemy patrols while continuing to track the leader's movements. Each day brought new dangers, but also new hope. The possibility of reunion drove her forward. For the SEAL team, the world had already written them off. For the commanders, the reports had concluded the mission tragically. But in the quiet observation and patient calculation of this one woman, hope remained alive. The story was not finished. The mission was not over. And so she moved, step by careful step, through the darkness and the danger, toward a man who was still alive, though unaware that someone was coming to find him. Each movement, each calculation, each careful breath brought them closer. Her focus never wavered. Her patience never faltered. In the harshest of lands, she became both guardian and guide. While the world believed the story was done, she was rewriting it silently. The missing leader had a chance because she refused to accept defeat. Her presence, her skill, and her unwavering patience were the difference between loss and survival. She had become a quiet force moving against impossible odds, and the first signs of hope were beginning to appear in the unforgiving terrain. The terrain grew harsher as the sniper moved forward. Rocks jutted out at odd angles, and the ground was uneven and treacherous. Every step had to be chosen carefully. She had been watching the signs for days, studying patterns and predicting movement, and now she saw evidence that her instincts had been right. Someone had survived the ambush. Someone had made it through the chaos. She had been following him without seeing him yet, reading the traces he left behind like a careful detective. At first, it was small things. A branch bent in the wrong direction. Footprints half covered by dust. A faint mark in the mud near a stream. To anyone else, these were insignificant details. To her, they were clues, proof that the leader was still alive. She slowed her pace, aware that every movement could reveal her presence. She moved like a shadow, blending into the landscape, careful not to alert anyone else who might be nearby. She finally saw him. He was in a small natural shelter, a hollow formed by rocks and debris. His uniform was torn and dirty. his face bruised, and his movements slow and deliberate. He was weak but alive. He had survived the ambush through sheer determination and training. She watched from a distance, taking note of his condition. He had a twisted ankle, shallow cuts on his arms, and dehydration was visible in the way he held himself. He had been moving cautiously, conserving energy, and avoiding any unnecessary exposure. The sniper stayed hidden, observing his routines. She saw how he rationed his water, how he moved to keep safe from patrols she knew were in the area. She understood his survival instincts because she had lived through similar situations. She did not rush in. Rushing could jeopardize everything. She knew the exact moment to act would come, and until then, patience was more valuable than speed. She began to plan. Extraction was not simple. The terrain was unforgiving, and the enemy was still present. Moving him immediately was dangerous, but leaving him in the shelter for too long was also risky. She would have to guide him out carefully, ensuring they were both safe. Every step, every decision, had to be calculated to minimize risk. Each night, she would watch, noting enemy movements, calculating the safest paths, and waiting for the right window to approach. She moved closer during the day only when visibility was poor and risk was low. She had to remain silent and unseen. She used every skill she had learned over years of training to ensure she remained undetected. Her presence had to be invisible until the moment he could be secured. Days passed, and she carefully approached closer. She left subtle signs to guide him, small indications that would not be noticed by the enemy, but could help him find his way if necessary. She also made sure he had enough supplies to survive, leaving small caches of water and food where she could, far enough that the enemy would not notice. Every action was deliberate, every gesture calculated to increase his chances without revealing her presence. Finally, she decided it was time to make contact. She chose the moment when enemy patrols were furthest from his shelter. Moving carefully, she approached and called softly, just enough for him to hear without attracting attention. His eyes widened in surprise, then relief as he recognized that someone was there to help. He had been alone for so long that hope seemed distant, almost impossible. The first few minutes were tense. He was wary, unsure whether this was a trap. She reassured him with simple gestures, showing that she meant no harm. Slowly, trust began to form. He realized that she was there to help, to guide him safely out of the dangerous area. They exchanged no words at first, only movements and careful nods, each understanding the other's intentions without speaking. She assessed his condition again. He was weaker than she had hoped, but still capable of following her instructions. She helped him stand, supporting him as he took tentative steps. Each movement was cautious, slow, deliberate. She kept watch constantly, ensuring that no patrols or dangers approached while they moved. The journey had begun, but it would be long and challenging. The leader depended on her expertise. He trusted her guidance, following her directions exactly as she instructed. She set the pace, paused when necessary, and constantly scanned for threats. Every sound was analyzed, every shadow observed. The enemy was still near, and one wrong move could undo all their progress. They moved through hidden paths, avoided open areas, and took cover when necessary. Nights were the most dangerous, but also the most necessary for travel. Darkness provided cover, but also required complete awareness. The sniper's skills were unmatched in these conditions. She guided him, protected him, and ensured that they remained unseen. As they traveled, they developed an unspoken rhythm. The leader's movements grew more confident, more coordinated with hers. He began to rely on her silently, learning her signals and patterns. She adjusted to his pace, ensuring that he did not exhaust himself, while still moving efficiently toward safety. Water and food remained limited. She rationed carefully, ensuring both had enough energy to continue. Injuries were treated with what supplies she carried. Every small decision could mean the difference between life and death. She remained calm, focused, and precise, never allowing panic to interfere with her judgment. The terrain became more challenging with every mile. Rivers, steep ridges, and thick brush slowed their progress. She chose paths that minimized exposure while maximizing speed. Each decision required careful thought and planning. The leader learned to trust her implicitly, following her guidance without hesitation. He had relied on training for survival, but now he relied on her expertise to lead him through danger. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Days and nights blurred together. Every sound, every movement could be a threat. Sleep was minimal, taken in short bursts whenever the area was safe. Hunger and fatigue weighed heavily, but determination and the presence of hope kept them moving. Neither allowed despair to take hold, focusing only on each step and each breath. At times, enemy patrols came close, forcing them to hide for hours. They remained still, silent, and invisible. The leader had learned to control his fear, relying on her guidance. She moved with a calm precision that reassured him. The danger was real, but survival depended on patience, caution, and trust. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a point where the terrain opened up slightly. A safer area was near, one where extraction could be possible. Relief was subtle but present. They were not yet safe, but the path to safety was clearer. Their movements became more confident, each step a small victory against the odds. The bond between them grew silently. Words were few, but understanding was deep. She had guided him through danger and uncertainty, and he had survived with her help. Mutual respect and reliance formed in the silence, each understanding the other's importance without speaking it aloud. The sniper knew that the final steps were still dangerous. Extraction had to be carefully timed, and the enemy was still unpredictable. But they were close to the point where they could reach safety. Every movement, every breath, was now leading toward the possibility of reunion with the team, with those who had mourned him prematurely. In the quiet moments, as they paused to rest and observe, the leader began to regain some strength and confidence. The sniper remained watchful, guiding, protecting, and teaching him small lessons to conserve energy and avoid danger. Together, they navigated the unforgiving landscape, step by cautious step, moving ever closer to safety. Hope, once fragile and distant, now grew stronger with every mile. The journey had been long, dangerous, and uncertain, but survival was no longer just a possibility. It was becoming a reality. The sniper had found him, protected him, and guided him through nearly impossible conditions. The final challenge remained, but with careful planning, patience, and trust, they could make it. The night air was cold, but for the first time in days, the leader felt something he had not felt since the ambush. Hope. Not a distant, fragile hope, but a tangible, moving hope. He had survived the ambush, survived alone, and now, thanks to her, he had a chance to make it back to safety. Step by step, breath by breath, they moved together toward a future that had seemed impossible just days before. The journey was far from over. Every step the leader took was guided by the sniper's careful instructions, but the terrain refused to make it easy. Rocks jutted out from the ground, roots twisted underfoot, and narrow ridges left little room for error. Each movement was measured and deliberate. She constantly scanned the horizon, every sense alert for danger. Every sound was analyzed, every shadow questioned. Even the wind could carry threats or give warnings. The leader relied on her completely. His strength had returned slightly, but his injuries and fatigue still limited him. He followed her silently, aware that any mistake could cost them both. The sniper moved like a shadow, her pace steady, her presence reassuring. She offered no speeches, no words of comfort beyond necessary instructions. That calm, precise guidance became his anchor in a world that had been hostile and unforgiving. They traveled mostly at night. Darkness concealed them, but it also demanded vigilance. Every movement was cautious. Every step, every breath, was part of a careful dance with the landscape and the enemy. She led him along paths she had chosen carefully, avoiding open areas, and using natural cover whenever possible. Streams, rocks, and fallen trees became shields in the darkness. Hunger and fatigue gnawed at them both. Food and water were minimal. She rationed carefully, ensuring they could continue moving without exhausting their supplies. Every meal was calculated, every sip of water measured. Even small mistakes could become serious problems in this environment. She had learned to endure, to ration, and to plan for contingencies in situations that seemed impossible. The leader leaned on his training, but he had never faced a situation like this. Alone, injured, and relying on another person completely was unfamiliar. Yet her presence gave him the confidence to move forward. Each step they took together strengthened their silent understanding and trust. Words were unnecessary. Experience and intuition guided them. Enemy patrols remained a constant threat. At times, they had to hide for hours, crouched low, silent, and invisible. Movement was delayed and patience tested. The sniper's eyes never wavered. She assessed every potential risk, every sign of activity. One misstep could expose them. Her calm confidence became the leader's anchor. He learned to wait, to trust, and to follow without question. The days and nights blurred together. The sun rose and set, casting shadows that changed the landscape, hiding some dangers and revealing others. They moved when conditions were most favorable, resting when risk was high. Sleep was taken in short intervals, always alert for threats. Their journey was slow, but every step forward was progress. She left small signs of guidance that the leader could see if needed. These were subtle, marks in dirt or slight disturbances in leaves, but they were enough for him to orient himself if separated. He had begun to understand her methods and instincts, learning to predict her next move without words. Their rhythm grew silent but precise, a shared understanding born of necessity. Every obstacle tested them. Rivers blocked paths, ridges forced detours, and thick brush slowed their pace. She guided him through these challenges with quiet confidence. Her training, experience, and instinct allowed them to move where most would have been stuck. The leader's reliance on her increased with each obstacle overcome. In moments of pause, he allowed himself to notice details he had missed before. The stars above, the distant mountains, the wind shifting through the trees. She rarely spoke, but her presence communicated assurance and focus. She was always scanning, always analyzing, and always ready to act. Her calm was contagious, and he learned to match it. The leader's injuries required careful attention. The sniper cleaned his cuts, wrapped his wounds, and monitored his condition. Fatigue was combated with brief rests, nutrition rationed carefully, and morale maintained silently. She knew that one lapse could jeopardize the entire mission, and she remained vigilant at every moment. They began to see signs that they were approaching safer territory. The terrain changed, becoming less hostile, and natural cover increased. The leader's movements grew more confident. Their progress was slow, but it was steady. Each small success strengthened their determination. The thought of rejoining his team and returning to safety became more tangible. At times, he spoke briefly, testing the boundaries of trust, but she answered only with calm guidance and silent gestures. Words were unnecessary. Their understanding was built on observation, shared experience, and mutual reliance. Each knew the other's capabilities and limits, and that knowledge was invaluable. The sniper never allowed complacency. Every step, every decision was deliberate. Even as the terrain improved, threats remained. Patrols, natural hazards, and exhaustion were still factors. She remained vigilant, guiding him with a balance of caution and efficiency. The leader's confidence grew under her guidance, but he remained aware of the dangers. Their journey continued for days. Night after night, they moved silently, guided by her expertise. Hunger, fatigue, and injuries persisted, but neither allowed them to dominate their actions. Progress was measured, deliberate, and careful. Every step forward was a triumph against the odds. Slowly, they approached the area where extraction could be possible. The sniper scouted ahead, checking for threats and ensuring the path was safe. Her patience, planning, and skill made the impossible seem achievable. She had guided him from almost certain loss to a position where survival and reunion were within reach. The leader, once alone and injured, now walked with confidence he had not felt in days. His trust in her was complete. Every step forward strengthened his resolve. Every silent exchange communicated understanding, reliance, and growing hope. He had survived the ambush, and now, thanks to her, he was moving toward rescue. Finally, as they paused on a ridge overlooking safer land, the leader allowed himself to hope. The journey had been long, exhausting, and dangerous, but survival was no longer uncertain. He had been brought through the worst of the mission, protected and guided by a woman whose skills were unmatched, whose patience was endless, and whose determination was unwavering. Together, they prepared for final approach to extraction. Every step was calculated, every breath deliberate. Danger still existed, but hope had returned. Step by step, they moved forward toward safety, toward reunion, and toward the end of a story that had seemed lost. The sniper's presence had turned despair into determination, fear into cautious confidence, and isolation into hope. The last stretch of their journey was the hardest in its own way. The terrain had eased somewhat, but the danger was still very real. Enemy patrols could appear at any moment, and every step had to be deliberate. The leader, though stronger than when she had first found him, was still weakened from days of injury and fatigue. He leaned on her guidance completely, trusting her silently with his life. She moved with careful precision, scanning the surroundings constantly. Every rustle, every shadow, every distant sound was analyzed. She had learned to anticipate danger and to guide him safely around it. Each night, they used darkness for cover. Each day, they found hidden locations to rest, rationing food and water carefully. Sleep was limited, stolen in small moments of security. Their progress was measured in cautious steps, but it was steady. As they moved, the leader thought back on the events that had led him here. The ambush, the chaos, the fear of being lost forever. He had relied on his own skills, but he had also survived through stubborn will and determination. Now, though, he was learning to rely on someone else. It was a difficult lesson, but necessary. Her presence gave him hope he had not felt in days. He began to understand that survival was not only about skill, but about trust. Finally, after hours of careful movement, they reached a point where the landscape opened slightly, allowing them to see distant terrain that appeared safer. Relief was quiet but profound. The sniper scanned ahead, confirming that there were no immediate threats. She instructed him on the safest path forward, signaling carefully and guiding him step by step. He followed without hesitation, moving with confidence he had not felt since before the ambush. The moments of danger and tension had forged a silent bond between them. Words were rare, but understanding ran deep. He began to trust her instinctively, knowing that her decisions were precise and her patience unmatched. She, in turn, had come to understand his endurance, his resilience, and his determination to survive. Each had earned the other's respect in silence. As night fell, they moved toward the extraction point she had identified. Every movement was cautious, deliberate, and calculated. She ensured they remained hidden while maintaining steady progress. The leader's steps, though slower than usual, matched her guidance exactly. There was a rhythm between them now, a silent coordination born of necessity and shared survival. Eventually, they reached the edge of friendly territory. Relief was not loud, but it was real. The sniper made final checks, scanning the area and preparing signals for extraction. She maintained focus, knowing that danger could still appear at the last moment. The leader, exhausted but alive, understood the importance of patience. He had survived so far because of careful planning and steady guidance. When the extraction team arrived, the leader felt a surge of emotions he had not expected. Relief, gratitude, and all mingled together. The team had believed him lost, and now they saw him alive, guided safely by the woman who had risked everything to find him. The reunion was quiet but meaningful, with nods, brief words, and unspoken understanding. The sniper remained composed, observing the extraction and ensuring that the leader could be safely moved. She did not seek recognition or applause. Her role was complete. She had accomplished her mission with precision and patience. Her presence had turned a story of loss into one of survival and hope. As the leader was escorted safely to the extraction point, he looked back at her with silent gratitude. Words were unnecessary. He knew he owed his life to her skill, her patience, and her unwavering focus. The bond formed in those days of danger and uncertainty would not be forgotten. The SEAL team had feared the worst, and now they had proof that hope and survival could prevail even in impossible circumstances. They had trained for situations like this, but nothing prepared them for the quiet courage, skill, and patience that had guided their leader back from the brink. The extraction team carried him to safety, and slowly, the full story began to be understood. The details would be recorded, but some parts, the silent guidance, the patience, the careful calculations, would never be fully captured in reports. They existed in the memories of those who had lived it. The leader, once alone and injured, was finally safe. He had survived against odds that had seemed insurmountable, guided by a presence that was calm, precise, and unstoppable. The journey had tested endurance, patience, and trust. Every step had been a lesson in survival. Every pause a test of vigilance. He knew that he had been given a second chance. The experience had changed him, instilling deeper understanding of reliance, patience, and respect. The woman who had brought him back had shown that skill and courage often work quietly, without recognition, but with profound effect. As he looked back one last time at the landscape they had crossed together, he realized how fragile and precious life could be. The sniper had taught him that survival was not just about individual skill, but about trust, timing, and patience. She had rewritten what he thought was the end of his story. The team around him celebrated quietly, relieved and awed by the fact that he was alive. Words of gratitude and respect were exchanged. The ordeal had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but the outcome was extraordinary. The story of loss had transformed into a story of hope, courage, and survival. In the shadows, the sniper faded back into anonymity. Her work was complete. She would not be praised publicly. Her name would not appear in reports as prominently as those she had saved, but her impact was undeniable. The leader's life, the trust of the SEAL team, and the outcome of the mission were all testaments to her skill and determination. The leader, now safe and recovering, carried with him the lessons of endurance, trust, and reliance. He had been found, guided, and saved by someone whose patience and skill had made the impossible achievable. That knowledge would stay with him, a silent acknowledgement of the courage and precision that had saved his life. Though the sniper disappeared from view, her presence remained in the minds of those who had witnessed the reunion. The story would be told in fragments, quietly, among those who understood the weight of survival. She had turned a story of loss into a story of life, hope, and extraordinary human endurance. The leader and his team returned to their routines, carrying with them the quiet knowledge that survival often depended not just on skill, but on patience, observation, and trust. And somewhere, watching silently, the sniper continued her work, ready for the next mission, the next life to protect, unseen but profoundly impactful. In the end, legends are not always celebrated publicly, but they are remembered by those whose lives they touch, quietly, profoundly, and forever.